So I just wanted to let you guys know what's going on. So I think those are all the good news and the bad news.
I think any of this was predestined.
It's not video.
Well, let me do a couple of these. We'll do our good and bad things for today. Like I said, I know it's a little longer than normal but like I said, I think it's important too, just to let people know what's going on and what's new. So last week, a Christian without a church is like a bee without a hive. So buzz on in. I agree with those words a lot. That's a good one. Do not give up when you still have something to give. That's another good one too. Do not give up when you still have something to give. And I think a lot of people do have a lot to give still. So, for all you football fans out there, drop "Kick Me Jesus" through the goalposts of life. There's a song about that.
Song.
I was gonna say I think there's a song about that. So, vent for sympathy, pray for strength. So vent for sympathy, pray for strength. Favorite one that my dad always said, "Don't make me come down there, God."
Don't make me come upstairs.
Exactly.
Don't make me stop this car.
Yeah, that one too.
You've heard that before.
Yes. So, and the last one, a hypocrite is a person who's not himself or herself on Sunday. So basically, are your actions reflective of who you are all the whole week, or just on Sunday? So, but
Probably better during the week, because then I don't have to say anything about the Packers.
Not much to say about it.
yeah, that's true.
Lori DeYoung had on Facebook. I don't see any posts about the Packers. Did they not play?
I think the Vikings will win that division.
So far.
Yeah.
But so let's take some time too, because I always think this is important. Go around the room, see how everybody's doing. I think my good things for this week was confirmation. The service was really fun. It was good.
Nice
For as long as it was, it didn't feel like it was, I was really like, I looked afterwards, I'm like, man, we're already this deep, and it doesn't feel like it didn't feel like anything was dragging. It didn't, to me. I felt like we were moving along, but yeah, it was.
Until I saw the film.
Yeah.
And as Bennett was walking out, ooh, look at all those empty seats there. People left. But.
So, yeah. But what do you do? So yeah. So the hard thing for me this week is my kids have had COVID, so I've been testing every day.
Really?
So they finally had a negative test last night. So, and I've had negative tests ever since.
What?
Sunday.
Both of them at?
Yeah, both of them have it. So Harry got it first on Saturday, and then Evelyn got it on Sunday, and I've been testing since Saturday. So, and I've been negative the whole time. So, and then to them it was just a bad cold. They were just coughing like Jeanette.
Yeah.
I got coffee in my throat.
Oh, I know. I'm just teasing you.
My
So,
daughter-in-law has it too out in Kentucky. They just told me this morning. So
Well, Roger Evans had it too.
yeah, a lot of people did. So,
I
Our
called to
sister at?
yeah.
I called to get to get my furnace checked
Mhm.
this fall, and he faltered. I'm sorry, but half of my crew is out with COVID. So
Oh, yes.
he said, let him call next week. So she called me this morning. So
There you go. All right. Well, let's dive into our text for today. So we are in 2 Kings. So last week with 1 Kings, we sort of left off with Solomon. So Solomon was this really good king in some respects. In some respects, he was not a good king. In some sense, Solomon was the king that God warned the people about at the beginning, when the people said, we need a king. And God said, well, you know what that king's going to do to you, right? We don't care. Well, they did. They got to care because the king was using Israelites, his own people, as slave labor to create God's temple and to create his own palace. And his palace was more ornate than God's temple. So, was Solomon really doing what God wanted him to do? That's debatable. At times, he did. He did exactly, I think in the early days, he did really good. And I'd like Don's point last week was, did God give him these other things to sort of test him to see if this was, was Solomon really just saying, I want wisdom because, wink, wink, this is the right thing to say versus, wealth and some other stuff. So, but unfortunately, like I said, we see this, what happens over a period of time is that Solomon, the reign doesn't go well. And then Solomon sets up his son to be king, and unfortunately, that doesn't work out. And it doesn't work out because his son is very arrogant. And so there's sort of a breaking. This is when you have a breaking of the kingdom of Israel. So very much like the American Civil War, you have a north and south. Now you have a very much north and south territory. You have the northern kingdom and you have the southern kingdom. So, and when we enter, so the northern kingdom was referred to as Israel, and the southern kingdom was referred to as Judah. So this is so after Solomon, you have a break, which is, that's not God's plan, or that's not God's intention. God's intention was never that Israel would fracture, because that just shows you how much they didn't agree with each other, how much they were not following God at the time that they fractured. So you have kings now in the south and kings now in the north. And as we begin to look at 2 Kings, the Assyrians come into the picture. So they're a nation from Assyria, and they destroy the northern kingdom. So the northern kingdom is no more. They are under Assyrian control. So Judah is the sole custodian of the promise. And so as we start looking through the text here today, so Israel is not in a position of strength right now. There's all these other bigger nations that are around them. Eventually, the Babylonians will show up and take over Judah and the northern kingdom, and then take all the people that they want to take from their home back to back to Babylon. So basically that's what's happening is, so at the end of 2 Kings, I believe, yes, what happens is you basically have a big brain drain in Israel, a cultural drain in Israel, and that all the people that could cause problems or might cause problems are taken out of Israel and exiled into Babylon. So it'd be the same as if Minnesota took over most of Wisconsin and decided, okay, everybody out of Baldwin's going to go now live in, Duluth. What would that feel like? We'd be, this is our culture, this is who we are, this is where we've lived for so many years, and now all of a sudden, now we have to live in Duluth. We don't mind visiting there, but, we don't.
Wouldn't go well.
Yeah, it wouldn't go well. Just think of, your family history is all here, and all the memories you have are here, and now suddenly you're
And the Vikings.
And the Vikings are all here, or over there. So,
Yeah. What about the feelings of those who were left behind?
Well, there's that
I
too.
take it.
Yeah.
Aren't I good enough to?
Yeah.
Well, and then how are you going to cope? Now you have all it's like having, let's say if they did that, and we use that same example, they took all the doctors and medical staff. What are you left with here? You don't have that, that medical staff here to do you have the hospital, sure, but who's going to run it? You have, all these people like for city council and stuff, or the police officers, suddenly they're gone. What are you going to do? Somebody's got to fill that role. You have all that knowledge that would normally be passed on. Now you don't. So eventually that's where we're going to end up with. But we're not at that point at our reading for today. So we're going to be in 2 Kings chapter 5, verses 1 through 15. And then we're actually going to read through 19. So who would like to read 1 through 5?
Now Naaman was commander of the army of the king of Aram. He was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram. He was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Now bands of raiders from Aram had gone out and had taken captive a young girl from Israel, and she served Naaman's wife. She said to her mistress, "If only my master would see the prophet who is in Samaria, he would cure him of his leprosy." Naaman went to his master and told him what the girl from Israel had said. "By all means, go," the king of Aram replied. "I will send a letter to the king of Israel." So Naaman left, taking with him 10 talents of silver, 6,000 shekels of gold, and 10 sets of clothing.
6 through 10.
He brought the letter to the king of Israel, and which read, "When this letter reaches you, know that you have sent to you my servant Naaman, that you may cure him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes and said, "Am I God to give death or life, that this man sends word to me to cure the man of his leprosy? Just look and see how he is trying to pick a quarrel with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes, he sent a message to the king. "Why have you torn your clothes? Let him come to me, that he may learn that there is a prophet in Israel."
2 more verses.
So Naaman came with his horse and chariots and halted at the entrance of Elisha's house. Elisha sent a message to him saying, "Go wash in the Jordan 7 times, and your fresh flesh shall be restored, and you shall be clean."
11 through 15.
But Naaman went away angry and said, "I thought that he would surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God, wave his hand over the spot and cure me of my leprosy. Are not Abana and Par the rivers of Damascus better than any of the waters of Israel? Couldn't I wash in them and be cleansed?" So he turned and went off in a rage. How far?
Through 15.
Naaman's servants went to him and said, "My father, if the prophet had told you to do some great things, would you not have done it? How much more then, when he tells you, 'Wash and be cleansed'?" So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Then Naaman and all his attendants went back to the man of God. He stood before him and said, "Now I know there is no God in all the world except in Israel. Please accept now a gift from your servant."
16 through 19.
But he said, "As the Lord lives, before whom I stand, I will take nothing." And he urged him to take it, but he refused. Naaman said, "If not, please let your servant at least be given 2 mules load of earth, for your servant will no more offer burnt offering, nor will he sacrifice to other gods, but to the Lord. In this matter may the Lord pardon your servant. When my master goes into the house of Rimmon to worship there, and he leans on my hand, and I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, when I bow myself in the house of Rimmon, the Lord pardon your servant in this matter." He said to him, "Go in peace." So he departed from him some distance.
Awesome. All right, so what do you think? What do you get out of this particular text? And I'll put the caveat in there too. It's All Saints Sunday, so I need something good, so make sure it's a good answer.
It's an example again of ordinary people being saints.
Yeah.
The fact that that little girl from the land of Israel wants to help this actually enemy
Yep.
of her people.
Yep.
And then you've got the servants
Yep.
that say, well, what harm would it do to just try what the guy says?
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, again, they're just ordinary people, and they're helping.
Yeah. Just think of all those unsung saints in your own life. I mean, I was talking to Pastor John yesterday, and he was saying how many, we'll never know the names we may know the names of the people before us, but we don't know them, because do you guys know the people who originally started the church here at Gethsemane, back in the 1800s? Do we know that? We know that they got us to this point, right? Mm-hmm. That through their faithfulness and stuff like that, and probably 60 years from now, people aren't going to know who we are. They just know that people were here, were faithful, and kept it going. And think of how what we do today is based on those people from the past. And just think what they're going to do in the future based on what we're doing today. No pressure.
But they could have come and built a palace and
Yeah.
for something else besides God. I mean,
Yeah.
besides a church for
Yeah.
God.
Yeah.
And for people.
Yeah, so I think what Gene's saying, having those everyday saints in our lives, these people that we don't always know their names, but they have affected our lives, in big ways. Or just think of your kindergarten teachers or your Sunday school teachers, just think of all of those folks, that have had some impact on your life in a good and positive way.
Pastor, you had me give I call it a testimony,
Mm-hmm.
and I never heard anybody that had listened to it until last Sunday. I think Evan said they were looking through the different things on that and came across that, and he was so thrilled that,
Yep.
and he thanked me for doing that, so it made me feel good.
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, we don't always know the ramifications of our actions. I still remember when I was working in nuclear medicine, I had gone to this class on, I'm trying to remember because I was burned out in nuke. I was done. I can't remember what the name is, but it's, so I was there, they were introducing ourselves, and and I said, my name's Paul, I've worked in nuclear medicine over at Woodwinds, and this lady stops me and says, so you're Paul? I said, yeah. She says, you've worked at Woodwinds the whole time, there's no other Paul there. I'm like, right. She says, you took care of my dad. I said, I did? And she said, yeah, you were the one that he hated going to the test, but he liked you, and so he would go to the test because of you. And I never knew any of this. And so by the time she gets done with the whole story, everybody's crying. but like I said, it's you don't always see the impact of your actions right away. You may never know the impact of your actions, and so as we, this girl, when she told Naaman's wife, who's not named as well either, you notice that as well too. That if her never having said anything would never have set this in motion. But it's, like I said, what is that? How can you be that unrecognized saint for somebody else? Ooh. As you think about that this week, how can you be an unrecognized saint for somebody?
And another thing, it was just simple things.
Yeah. Yeah, was it?
It
Was it?
wasn't a big, fancy action. It was a simple thing.
It's a simple thing. That's another big thing out of this text too. I think a lot of times, what do you think of when you think of, I got to do something for somebody? What do you think you have to do? Does it have to be elaborate? Does it have to be perfect? I hope you're seeing every Sunday it does not have to be perfect. But this text reminds you again of that, of you don't have to be perfect. You don't have the right words to say. You don't have to have exactly the right thing to say. So, yeah, cool. So the other interesting thing about this particular part of the text, actually, that Don had brought up when he was talking about me having my transfiguration moment on the steps, is who, speaking of that, who else was with Jesus at the transfiguration?
Moses and Elisha.
Yeah. So we read about Elijah today. So we're seeing this other person who was sort of big in in terms of faith. So so it's interesting when you have that transfiguration moment for Jesus. Anybody could have showed up there, but it was Moses, and we all sort of know why Moses is, because Moses is, sort of the granddaddy of all leaders within the Jewish faith. But why Elijah? As you look at this story today, what about Elijah would be that second person? Why would he show up? Why do you think?
Well, this one is Elisha,
Right.
not Elijah.
True, but they're both
Yeah.
pretty.
Man of God.
Yeah. Well, they're both very similar.
Yeah.
He was a student. I think Elisha was
Yeah.
the student. So, but what about them? As you look at this, because both of them are very similar. That's why we get them confused all the time, like your pastor does. So, but what about Elijah and Elisha, as you read this story today too? What do you sort of see? Why would one of them show up for that transfiguration moment? Why do you think? Because you always remember, they don't just list names because they want to do a name drop. There's something important about these Elijah, but in this case, Elisha. There's, like I said, Elisha was a student of Elijah, but it gets around the same thing. There's something interesting about that person. What was interesting? And you can see it.
Guided him on.
Yeah.
Made sure that he went through with it.
Yeah. Has to do with what we thought about the last bulletin board thing we wrote on a church sign. Are you a hypocrite on Sunday?
They were true servants of God?
They lived their life.
They lived their life, their actions reflected what they preached. And that was really big, so because so the interesting thing, I saw this in the commentary reading through it, see if I can find that. There's actually a different word for Elijah and Elisha. The way that they're referred to in the, I think it was in this one. Yeah, I think this is where it is. Let's see. Like Elijah, Elisha works many wonders on behalf of the poor, even as he also locks horns with kings. Both prophets are referred to in this text not only by the generic Hebrew word for prophet, but also by the more specific title, man of God. Whereas the normal prophet word mediates between the human and divine in any number of ways, the other word typically embodies divine power, acting in the name of God in Israel and demonstrating that Israel's God is both real and dominant. So when they were referred to in the text as the prophet, they were actually, it's a different type of name. It's reminding folks that they're just not prophet in name, but they also embody who God is. And so I think we see that a little bit today in the text. How do you see Elisha embodying being a prophet of God? And I'll make it even harder for you. Other than him curing Naaman, what else do you see that he does that
His humility and that he wouldn't take credit for any of it.
yeah, he won't take credit for it. And so I think the other interesting thing here too is so what did Naaman have to do again? What did Naaman have to do in terms of to be cured? What did he have to do? Was it really hard?
Jump in the river.
Jump in the river. Just jumping in the river.
7 times.
Yep. And then, so here's the other question too. Was there anything special about the Jordan?
No,
No.
It was a muddy creek.
It's a muddy creek. Yeah, it is.
yeah, except when it floods.
Yeah.
So in some sense, you could say Elisha is so what God asks for us to do isn't always this outrageous thing. It's the common ordinary thing. Naaman gets to go jump in the Jordan a couple times. It's not a big deal, right? Anybody could do that. That's why Naaman's mad. He's like, what do you mean? This got to be, how many, I should have to kill a boar or hunt down these many people. And Elisha's like, no, just jump in the river.
My footnotes have an interesting to what you just said. For dipped himself in the Jordan, the Greek verb typically describes dipping a portion of something in a liquid rather than total immersion.
Yeah.
Naaman would likely have just had leprosy on a certain part of his body and immersed that, not his whole body.
Yeah.
I've always thought of him
Jumping in.
diving.
Well, that make it even easier. But I think that's, the message that we're sort of seeing as Elisha is embodying God's Spirit, as embodying that divine power that.
But isn't that why we use water in baptism? Is because it's a common thing that there,
Yeah.
and the river was there, and
Yeah.
it was an important part of the country.
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons why all the sacraments we have were stuff that was common, that's what our faith is about. Yeah, it's about common things. It's not about, having something special. I mean, there wasn't like
you had to go across the country to get it.
Right. It wasn't, you notice like none of our sacraments have to do with gold and silver, right?
Yep.
It's water. It's bread, wine. It's really common stuff. And I think this story reminds us again how God comes to us in the common. And we need to see that. We need to understand that because I think a lot of us are looking outside, okay, did God come down from the clouds today? And we don't see God in that person that walks to us up today. How are you doing today? We don't see that God in that person who, if we're having a bad day today, can I buy a cup of coffee? Or when you're going through the line, like KTIS, somebody has bought the coffee in front of you. You don't even know who they are, but someone decided to do that today. It's acts like that happen every day that we need to be reminded that's where God is. And this story reminds us of that, especially on this All Saints Sunday.
So when Naaman left and they took all this silver and jewels and clothing, was that because he was going to stay a while?
No. So here's the reason why. So we had talked at the earlier part of the text where the people of Judah were scared out of their mind that someone was going to take them over, and so he pulls up. So this is the reason why the king is mad, or the king is like freaking out because this guy pulls up, throws him all this stuff, and says, "Okay, you're going to cure me today, aren't you?" And the king's like, "I don't have anybody who can cure you," And so what he was thinking was that Naaman was going to be insulted by these gifts, that he couldn't do anything with these gifts. Hey, I gave you all this stuff. You didn't do anything for me. We're going to go to war and we're going to take over Judah. That's what the king was thinking of that. But Naaman's coming by and I'm just going to give you all this stuff. He's trying to buy his way into God's good graces. So that's sort of the interesting thing about that. And Naaman rolls up, the same thing too. He rolls up outside of, Elisha's house. If you think of it today, he probably rolled up in a Ferrari. He had his entourage with them, And if you think of if we're right outside the church, a little kid comes out and says, yeah, this is what you need to do. Not even the pastor would walk out to go talk to him. It's just a little kid runs out. We'll have Luke Hoopmaker runs out to him and says, "Hey, this is all you got to do. This is what pastor told me to do." Well, wait a minute. Isn't the pastor going to come out and talk? No. He just said that's all you got to do. Really? I'm here with all my cars, my rings, all that stuff, and you won't even bother to come out to see me.
They never invited him in either.
No, he didn't.
Made him stay outside.
Yeah, stay out there. Yeah, we'll take care of you. Take care of you later. So, any other questions or thoughts about the text? I know I monopolized much of the beginning with all the announcements, so hopefully we won't have that long next time. So,
Just that he took 2 loads of dirt with him. That just seemed a little weird to me.
which part of that is that again?
When he has to take
17.
Oh, 17? Okay.
2 mule loads full of dirt, so that he went.
My footnote says Naaman thought he needed to worship God on Israelite soil
Yeah.
if his offerings were to be acceptable.
Yes.
So he took
Soil
it and
on.
set it on a little
Yeah.
platform as dirt or something, and then
Yeah.
did his sacrifices there.
Have that connection with the
The
Lord of
land.
Israel.
Yeah.
The notion prevailed in that time that the domain of a god was determined by national borders.
So now, thank you, Don. That makes sense that he would take the dirt with him because now he's part of Israel, and in that he has a part of Israel with him.
And it's quite a bit. It's as much as 2
It's
mules can carry.
Yeah, that's a lot of
There is
dirt.
no god except the God of Israel.
Right.
And
And now he's to make sure that he's connected. So,
Yep.
so you can see how big of a, and so like I said, small actions can lead to big outcomes. Because now you have a guy who never would have had anything to do with God, now taking the dirt out of Baldwin with him. So he always has Baldwin with him.
boy,
Clay.
Clay.
Heavy.
And so I think that's pretty good. So like I said, so I want you to think about this week who you can be that unnamed saint for. And it doesn't have to be anything exciting, as we learned today. So, any other thoughts about the text? And don't forget, it's daylight savings time for next week. So,
Good. Oh, it's dark.
I know, I'm getting there too. So, all right. So let me tell there. So.
Be in Shawano at a wedding.
Ah.
Will not be-
Well, thank you all for joining us for today. And remember, at this point in time, we'd ask you to pray. If you have any prayer concerns, please let the office know, myself know, or put them in the comments section below. Let's see if I can get to the off button. There we go.